Great chicken of the sky, please hear me beg. Unfold thyself from ball of scuff, and give me victory in this match. Light up the board with your cheat, and cast your nonsense upon my foe. Made up effects, that I say, since no one knows the rules. I make the rules in this here game. Marek, the absolute fraud! He is also my absolute favorite villain of the original Yu-Gi-Oh series. By a very, very large margin, I will add. Yami Bakura is the overall grand arching antagonist of the series, but he takes a really long time to kind of get anywhere, and a lot of the time he shows up, it's for a few episodes, then just leaves the plot for like 20 plus episodes before coming back for a handful, and then dipping out again. His dueling style is also a little bit boring and stally, I guess you could say, where he doesn't really duel actively, he relies on the Destiny board cards. So a little bit less excitement there than that. And Zork is just a flat Doomsday villain, he's just generic monster. And it's very hard to consider Kaiba really a villain because he's much more of strictly an anti-hero with regards to the series. But Marek, he's just a large ham, a scheming little weasel. And how absolutely over the top and absurd both he and Yami Marek are, it never fails to make me smile, and is the reason why Battle City is my favorite arc of the series. So much like when I rib on the Monsterverse and really Godzilla as a whole, the series, it comes from a place of love. Especially when it comes to Ra, because Ra is actually my fourth favorite Yu-Gi-Oh monster of the entire series. And this is not some, actually, Ra has the effects in the anime in the real game. Like, no. This is using the actual effects of Ra as they exist in the anime and as these cards exist within the anime's effects. Nothing in relation to their real-life cards. Even within the anime's BS rules and anime's BS effects a lot of these monsters have, Marek admits outright that he is cheating in some of the games. He has to legitimately cheat and is open about it, and he still doesn't win. And even the matches he does win, he doesn't actually defeat his opponent, except for a single duel. Now, before we get on to the rest of the Duel Monsters madness, if you guys haven't done so already, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Comment your thoughts below. Who is your favorite Yu-Gi-Oh monster? Who is your favorite of the 3 Egyptian god cards? And what's your favorite arc of the anime? This is again a bit different than what we normally do. We normally cover a lot more kaiju stuff, but we are branching out into some more things. And the Yu-Gi-Oh brain worms have sunk in heavily. Amusingly enough, actually, a few days before I really started recording this and while I was still in the process of scripting it out, someone used a Raw deck against me in Master Duel. The first time we actually get to see Marek duel, he is using Bandit Keith as his sort of puppet. And while he does use more or less Keith's standard machine deck that he used against Joey in Duelist Kingdom, he has added some new cards to it. But where the cheating comes in is a little machine things up his sleeves. Things for Zero Ritual, Zero the Mant, and a few other cards to, actually in a fashion almost exactly like what Bandit Keith did in Duelist Kingdom against Joey, pull out cards right from his sleeve whenever he needs them, and because he's of course hiding behind the dueling console, can't see. But even though it is Bandit Keith physically there dueling, Marek is simply controlling him like a remote control puppet, so it is actually Marek dueling here. And while the duel does not actually have any end result because the mind control is broken and Bandit Keith freaks out and causes the whole place to burn down, Yugi was still a fairly consistent. Keep in mind, this is little Yugi, this is not a Tem. This is little Yugi, able to consistently thwart a lot of what the cheating Marek is doing in this duel. The next duel we get involving Marek is through Strings the Puppet, who, once again, much like Michimochi Eevee and Shin Godzilla, there are no thoughts behind those eyes. Strings is once again simply a flesh puppet. Though he does wield the very fearsome Slifer, the Sky Dragon, or the executive producer, if you will. This is actually a legitimately kind of solid deck, again, falling within the anime's rules. Things like Revival Jam, not need to pay life points in order to continuously resurrect it, and through the use of cards like Jam Defender, the slime deck that he plays through strings is actually a fairly decent, solid one, relying heavily on Revival Jam's stalling potential, with cards such as Jam Defender to intercept all of his attacks, Yugi's attacks to stop him from destroying the slime tokens with Buster Blader, and Nightmare Steel Cage to simply stall out more turns as he is able to get the slime tokens necessary to sacrifice to summon Slifer proper. With both card of save for turn and a card to increase his hand size indefinitely to continuously pump up Slifer's stats when he manages to summon the Great Sky Dragon, while keeping many additional cards to increase his draw potential to pump up Slifer's attacking stats even further, because Slifer's attack power is based on the number of cards held in the hand. His heavy reliance on the sheer brute force of Slifer the Sky Dragon and the perceived invincibility of his combination, allowing him to block redirected attacks, things such as Magic Cylinder, by having Revival Jam intercept the attack before it rebounds and hits Slifer, which again allows him to continuously draw more and more cards, as well as Slifer's invulnerability to things such as various effects, is ultimately what becomes his undoing. His entire deck is so heavily geared into getting the Slifer engine rolling and getting Slifer on the field to use it as a giant beat stick. He had nothing else that could do anything. I will overlook the fact that there's no cards for piercing damage, because I don't believe they actually existed in the series at that point. We actually get the first instance of piercing damage relatively decent after Battle City, with Fairy Meteor Crush and Mad Sword Beast. But as we see of his deck after he collapses after drawing his entire deck and losing because he decks out, he had nothing but various slime cards, Jam Breeding Machine, Pot of Greed, Grateful Charity, ways of drawing more and more cards, which would burn through his deck extremely quickly. He was a simple one-trick pony here, as well as failed to account for how he could lose via attacking his other monsters, not just simply Slifer. So while he actually didn't cheat at all during his duel against Yugi via strings, it's a lot more to do with his narrow-minded thought process in there is nothing that can stop the God card, and that everything else is simply fodder. Despite the fact that he himself is entirely aware of how powerful individual cards can be, while not simply the centerpiece focus. Though the next one is actually basically the most egregious example of his outright absurd cheating, and the fact that he can't actually win an outright duel even when cheating and having other factors heavily in his favor. The mind-controlled Joey Wheeler versus YuGiOh. The setup for this is absurd, but honestly, again, one of the reasons I love Merrick. He has mind-controlled both Joey Wheeler and Taya. Joey and Yugi are strapped to chains that is hooked up to an anchor that will fall into the water and drown the loser, or both of them, if the duel goes on for too long, and if any outside people try to intervene, a shipping crate will be dropped on Taya. It is an absolutely brilliant, sadistic choice setup, as well as the fact that he had juiced up Joey's deck with cards that he acknowledges and outright says are illegal and forbidden cards to be dueling with. Things like Hinatama, Raigeki, Meteor of Destruction. Pairing that up with the fact that in this duel, because Yugi is fighting against his best friend and knows the loser will be sleeping with the fishes, doesn't want to actually win, and he's still trying to think of a way out of this, so he's not dueling at 100%. While at the same time, he is still outplaying Merrick, despite the fact that he makes a number of intentionally bad plays, things like exchange, letting Merrick see his hand and knowing, oh, he's got the red eyes, which is very easily takeable and used to just beat him down, which thankfully Joey does not give in and manages to overcome the brainwashing to take a different card, something which does ultimately allow Joey to break free of Merrick's mind control when Yugi himself plays the Red Eyes Black Dragon, and the just continuous damage Red Eyes keeps taking and the suffering through it, all for the sake of trying to bring back Joey, does get through to him, shattering Merrick's control, which allows the two of them to come to a draw in-universe, which prevents both of them from drowning. So even when Yugi was kind of hard throwing the duel, which he basically admits he's doing, he still beats Merrick, who is outright cheating in like 3 different ways. Also, recommend actually watching the Japanese version of this duel because there are a few scenes that are actually cut out in the dub that kind of add a lot more impact to why it is Joey is able to break out when it comes to Red Eyes' suffering. But it is worth remembering, Yugi and, to an extent, Joey are the protagonists. They have, to a degree, plot armor, or really in Joey's case, plot nega armor. So what happens when he duels against a more side character who is significantly more expendable, like my Valentine? Well, she basically kicks him around the curb the entirety of the duel. She starts out easily destroying a lot of his monsters, forcing him to play stall. And even when he brings out Jam Breeding Machine, something which again he uses to summon his big monsters, she dismantles that with Harpy's Feather Duster. She even specifically brings Amazon Chainmaster to yoink Ra out of his deck to stonewall him from playing it. Something that, due to his entire playstyle being designed and dedicated around the usage of the Winged Dragon of Ra, basically kneecaps him, in much the same way that his entire dueling style when playing with strings was focused around bringing out Slifer. He does have other cards, again as we see later, especially the 4-way duel, that focus on a bit of effect damage, and even actually later in this duel as well. He relies heavily on stalling, and really just has to sit there and take Mai's punches for most of the fight. As I mentioned his effect damage, he has Nightmare Wheel, which is something that will disable one of the monsters on the opponent's side of the field and inflict 500 points of damage to them every turn. Again, a fairly strong and useful card, but something that is only a band-aid on, even when there are 4,000 life points at play, that's gonna take 8 turns. And when he's getting pummeled every other turn, it kind of amounts to pennies. Even more so when Mai actually manages to summon the Winged Dragon of Ra, using Elegant Egotist on her Harpy Lady in order to tribute summon 3 monsters to summon Ra. This is the only reason why Merrick actually wins this fight. Because the Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode, which he is able to summon using the Ancient Chant, his entire field was wide open. He had no monsters. Mai had 3 monsters, totaling 5,600 attack points. Yes, she only loses because to a degree her ego kind of overrides things and she wanted to flex on Merrick by summoning Ra. That is absolute plot nega armor. And the only reason why the fight really got to that point in the first place is because Merrick was relying extremely heavily on his shadow magic powers. This is actually something we saw earlier on in the series where she is able to get overwhelmed and make poor decisions when she dueled against Panic and lost. Keep in mind, Panic was just using some fancy pyrotechnics. This is legit shadow magic. So while yes, it is on Mai for making a poor decision, it's also Merrick absolutely had nothing he could do. Had Mai not made a, yes, admittedly fairly stupid mistake, he would have gotten beyond outplayed nearly every single turn. Well, he had gotten outplayed nearly every single turn. Though in the end, because of Mai's own plot nega armor, she was banished to the Shadow Realm trapped in an hourglass for, well, honestly, we don't really know how long Battle City went. Time's kind of fluid. Now we get to actually the one duel Merrick does outright win without really any BS. And that is his duel against Yami Bakura. This is outside of the Battle City rules because it's, a duel for the Millennium items. Once again, it is actually another duel where Merrick loses the Winged Dragon of Ra because Yami Bakura yoinks it using cards such as Multiple Destruction to mill through hands and get other cards. But though Yami Bakura does use Exchange and take the Winged Dragon of Ra, Merrick yoinks Monster Reborn. That's what we like to call foreshadowing. And again, this does really showcase a lot of Merrick's dueling chops, having cards such as Joyful Doom, something that negates all the attack points of tribute monsters when Yami Bakura is going to summon the Winged Dragon of Ra, which, thanks to actually having regular Merrick as a disembodied spirit, he is able to actually summon it. But because Joyful Doom takes all the attack points of the attributed monsters to 0, Roz just got 0 attack points, making it a potato. And also adding all those attack points onto Yami Merrick's life points. And since, of course, Ra is now a literal potato, he is tributed to summon a different monster who's actually a little bit better. Doesn't save Bakura though, because after he tributes Ra to summon a better monster, it's in the graveyard. Which lets Yami Merrick use Monster Reborn and absolutely field wipes Bakura, destroying all 3 of his monsters with a absolutely juiced up Blaze Cannon nuke. Yeah, Bakura duels pretty well here. Merrick also duels pretty well here. Like, this is like the one time where, like, plot nega armor does not really matter. But a little fun detail is actually this. Regular Merrick mentions to Yami Bakura, because Yami Bakura wants to know, okay, well, what deck is he going to be using? You know, give me a little bit of help on him. Merrick says he doesn't know what cards Yami Merrick is using, except for the fact that Merrick never actually left the blimp to go get other cards. Meaning all of the cards Yami Merrick is using are cards that Merrick himself brought with him. Merrick doesn't even know what the cards he brought with did. I don't know, like, he brought a bunch of extra cards and doesn't even know what they do. I mean, I get why they did it, for plot reasons, you know, different deck for, you know, more powerful, which is like, you know, the difference with them. But it also kind of doesn't make any sense. How did he get other cards? Which would mean that, again, Merrick kind of doesn't even know what his own cards do. But I mean, it does further kind of simplicity, because Yami Merrick's strategies are a bit more complex than regular Merrick, but they are similarly simplistic in, like, single target focus on certain monsters. The 4-way duel between Joey, Kaiba, Yugi, and Yami Merrick is another one we do get to see Merrick with kind of the gloves off, showing he has a much more effect damage burn deck. But it also shows that he, despite being able to play relatively well, does also get pretty consistently outplayed throughout the entire duel. He is actually the first person eliminated, largely because both Joey wants to fight him first, and Kaiba wants to fight Yugi first, leaving him as the odd one out and knowing that, okay, we gotta eliminate those 2 first, resulting in Merrick getting knocked out first. But that's also because Joey legitimately outplays both Merrick and Kaiba in that entire duel, showing once again, Merrick gets outplayed. Because Merrick was actually going to fight Yugi first. Now, in the semi-final duel, the one against Joey is actually the one that illustrates a lot of this just kind of turbo fraud really the best. While Joey doesn't really have anything particularly strong in his opening hand, he does draw both Jinzo and later Panther Warrior, which allows him to actually have a significant amount of power to take down Merrick's summoned Helpo Emmer. Now, in a fairly smart move, Merrick does have Plasma Eel, something that is capable of decreasing the attack points every single turn of an opponent's monster, allowing his monsters to survive a little bit better. Though it is not enough to prevent Helpo Emmer from being destroyed, which, though actually was Merrick's entire plan, so that Helpo Emmer would be taking a card out of Joey's hand every single turn. But this brings into, again, Merrick's over-reliance on the Shadow Magic. Because of the way the Shadow game is set up, anytime any effect would activate which decreases attack power or would destroy a monster, the wielder of the monster would feel the pain of the impact. So every turn, Joey gets zapped because Plasma Eel attached to Panther Warrior. This would gradually sap Joey of physical strength and ability to remain cognizant in the duel without actually damaging his playing ability, as in affecting his card's ability to do anything. Again, technicality abuse. But he does lean far more aggressively into his effect damage setup this duel. Despite drawing Ra fairly early, he relies on Coffin Cellar and Nightmare Wheel to gradually chip away at life points, as well as featuring cards to dump parts of his hand into the graveyard to activate their effects, namely Legendary Fiend, where he tosses out the Winged Dragon of Ra in order to summon it. However, because Helpo Emmer was entirely his main play for getting rid of cards in Joey's hand, when it yoinked Jinzo and Joey activated Question, Merrick had no idea what the monster at the bottom of Joey's graveyard was. Previously, it was Alligator Sword, but he removed that from play with Tribute Burial, meaning he now had no idea what card was at the bottom of Joey's graveyard. And of course, with Jinzo back in play, that outright disabled Nightmare Wheel. But packing a good layer of redundancy, he had Lava Golem in place, allowing him to Tribute Summon a monster to Joey's side of the field by removing 2 of his monsters in defense mode, in Lava Golem, which would deal 1,000 points of damage every turn, as well as activating Machine Duplication to summon 2 more Lava Eels to once again sap monster strength and cause more pain to Joey. Though he did have nothing prepared for Joey utilizing Graceful Dice to actually juice up Plasma Eel, making Machine Duplication no longer apply to it, and getting rid of the other 2, freeing up his monsters. Which, even though Plasma Eel is immune to battle destruction, because Joey was able to get 3 monsters he could tribute, special summon Guilford the Lightning, which, well, Merrick really had nothing for it, because when summoned with 3 tributes, Guilford destroys the monster on the field, clearing away an invincible Plasma Eel by getting rid of his reliance on an effect monster. This ordinarily would have left him completely open if it wasn't for Monster Reborn, which allowed him to resurrect Winged Dragon of Ra and use instant attack to vaporize Guilford the Lightning. This is what highlights the biggest weakness of Merrick with, again, the over-reliance on the Shadow Magic. He did not think that after paying 1,000 life points to activate Ra's instant attack monster vaporization effect to destroy Guilford the Lightning and of course cause more pain to Joey, which again didn't cause any actual damage in terms of life points, Joey would have gotten taken out of the game there. And then he won on technicality because his opponent would be unable to battle. Joey is still standing. And that causes Merrick to absolutely panic. Because his entire deck, his entire style of dueling was geared into just trying to exhaust Joey with his Shadow Magic. He had no actual plan to beat Joey outright. And when Joey was left standing, Drew Gearfried was able to summon it. Merrick even says he's got nothing. His field is open, and he actually, in the Japanese version, he actually throws up because of the stress, which was actually cut out in the dub. That's actually why afterwards he's washing out his mouth in the bathroom. But Joey does end up collapsing and is unable to continue the duel, thus technicality giving Merrick a win. While some people will say, well, if it wasn't a shadow duel, Merrick would have still won anyway. No, Merrick would not have won that duel. The reason is, he only activated Monster Reborn to bring back Ra and then vaporize Guilford the Lightning to cause damage to Joey, which, yes, did take down his life points by 1,000 points, giving him from 1,900 to 900, which did put him in range of Gearfried the Iron Knight. However, Guilford the Lightning still would have knocked all of his life points out of existence anyway, because again, 2,800 versus 1,900 life points. He's going down. However, even if, again, that was the actual play to get rid of Guilford the Lightning with the 1,000 points and having 900 life points remaining, hoping that Joey wouldn't draw a monster card with enough power to take him down, Joey would have still wiped him out with Gearfried. 900 points, again, less than 1,800. He had nothing. He got absolutely outplayed, and while he did have a number of redundancies in case Joey did manage to get the jump on him, and had to rely on a technicality purely because his over-reliance on his Shadow Man. Again, love the guy, really, and this is actually probably one of my favorite duels, but even though Mai's loss was technically her own fault, this was entirely Merrick lucking out. He did not deserve that win. And the last up, at least dueling-wise, is actually his final duel against Yugi, where, somewhat similar to the duel against Joey, he's not entirely 100% going straight for the third immediately to get the win, because Merrick at this point has become repentant, and Yami Yugi doesn't want to game-end Merrick. At least, not evil Merrick. But there is some fairly good back and forth. Their monsters do kind of match one another. Goes back and forth at the start, with Merrick tossing Ra actually fairly early on in the fight. But he has, again, by this point, really hard spec'd into his Monster Reborn Resurrection strategy. something which Yugi is actually able to counter by yoinking his Monster Reborn to resurrect his Queen's Knight, so that when he summons King's Knight, he's able to instant summon Jack's Knight, and then bring out Slifer the Sky Dragon. Though to Merrick's credit, he does actually have a plan to bring out Ra and actually uses Ra to intercept Slifer the Sky Dragon's attack, which, because Immortal Phoenix is invulnerable to damage, Slifer's ability doesn't actually destroy it. But in the exact same fashion, Yugi is able to use the exact card Kaiba gave him, Fiend's Sanctuary, to counter after Merrick fuses with Ra for an instant attack, since Merrick does use Ra's effect to wipe out Slifer the Sky Dragon. And once again, he does have actually a somewhat plan for if Obelisk came out, having Egyptian god Slime to serve as a mirror counterpart to survive destruction. Though Yugi does actually use Egyptian god Slime against him, because he actually uses a bit of a combination of a Jam Defender strategy, to sacrifice Egyptian god Slime, which serves as 2 tributes to activate Obelisk's infinite power effect, to try to go for a field nuke. However, since Merrick activates the card class system, which prevents Ra from being destroyed by any monster with equal or less stars than it, it does manage to survive the infinite damage wrath of Obelisk the Tormentor. However, Yugi is able to activate an effect to remove Ra from the game, which Ra may have effects to prevent him from being destroyed. Merrick didn't consider anything about removal from the game, which has, again, the double duty effect of removing basically all of Yami Merrick's soul from the equation due to the fact that it is fused with Ra. Again, his ego overriding, focusing purely on stall and Ra pure power than any actual other thing, and again, no confidence in Arians thinking that nothing can beat him. Which, because Ragnarok deleted Ra from the game, which honestly I love that scene, pretty freaking awesome, regular Merrick is able to assert control and switch the two of them in place, because again, it is a shadow game. Yugi was also kind of holding back in the fight. And before anyone says Merrick actually surrenders at the end of the duel, Yugi actually doesn't beat him, because the activation effect for Ragnarok is he removes all cards, all monsters from his deck and his graveyard from play in order to activate it. Yugi still had Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl on the field. So even if the fight had continued, it was purely for symbolic reasons, Merrick just destroying his evil half. Merrick only had 1 life point, Yugi had 2 monsters, and there was nothing Merrick could have actually done. But even outside of his dueling not really being up to scratch, a lot of his just plans during Battle City had a lot of flaws in them. The 2 main ones actually involving Odeon. One, Merrick is a pretty disrespectful person. He constantly mocks Joey and really sneers at basically everyone, while Odeon is actually a very respectful and honorable person. That is ultimately what gives him away during Joey's duel with Odeon. Even Yugi also picks up on this, like, this is not the same kind of person that would go and do underhanded tactics like mind controlling his friends and forcing him to unwinnable situations, when Odeon is actually fairly honorable and fairly respectful. Though Merrick does actually slip a counterfeit version of Ra into Odeon's deck as a means to try to deflect away from him, he still fails to consider the fact that this is literally a god they are using. It does not take kindly to the counterfeit cards, and ultimately ends up with Odeon being struck down and knocked out by Ra. Now, the funny thing is that this video is actually somewhat prompted by a comment my brother made involving Rex Raptor, who he says is Yu-Gi-Oh's biggest fraud, because Rex actually doesn't win a single match on screen. He always loses. I disagree on saying Rex is the biggest fraud, because Rex straight up lost all his matches. Well, possibly other than Weevil, because we know in Weevil probably did cheat, but we don't know that. Where Merrick lost most of his matches, but even his wins, he didn't actually win them. By all rights, he lost them. And we actually do see in the Doma arc that Rex Raptor did actually step up his game quite a bit. He started out as simply a beatdown deck user, and realistically, early on, his deck revolved around high-level monsters purely for raw force. Because the massive difference in rules between Battle City's start and the prior initial part of the series, where there are no such thing as tributes, that heavily altered the game in universe. That's not like, oh, out of context, out of universe meta-contextually. a lot of Rex Raptors things are not as good because this. Like, no. In universe, they make acknowledgement of the massive rule shift and why it is the game is played differently. So we have to take that into account. And Rex actually takes this in stride extremely well, using actually a lot more effect monsters than simple beatdown strategies to, yes, swarm summon and bring out a lot of his bigger power monsters. He plays a lot more intelligently than he did before, which was, again, smooth brain, big damage, go burr. Doesn't save him, but he does play a lot more intelligently. Merrick just relied purely on his shadow magic, and really more than that, the Winged Dragon of Ra and Slife of the Sky Dragon for pure force. Yes, the Winged Dragon of Ra in the actual game has nowhere near the effects that, Winged Dragon of Ra does in the anime. And I absolutely love the fact that they actually did this. That they added, no less than, I think, 7 or 8 dedicated support cards to the Winged Dragon of Ra to allow it to have those effects from the anime. Again, that's a large part of the reason Ra is my favorite of the 3 Egyptian god cards. It's so absurd. Even though it is probably the weakest of the 3. But that is, I guess that kind of really is all today. I mean, I know this is a bit of a different kind of video than usual. It was, not really kaiju focused. It was, I guess kind of you could say Raza was rather kaiju. This is a strange creature. But, I love Yu-Gi-Oh! I kind of did want to, the brain worms have definitely been invading the brain again. And, it's something else. Yeah. Thank you guys. And, if you enjoyed, don't forget to leave a like on the video, comment your thoughts, subscribe for more, and let us know what you'd like to see next time, because we are going to be branching out and doing a lot more stuff, a lot more discussion-y things. Long live the Kaiju King. I have been your American Allosaurus, Max Allo.